We come to the statement, Secretary of State, Steve Reid.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. This government was elected on a promise to repair the broken foundations of local government. In 2024, councils were on the brink financially, while a third of the country was left paying for the wasteful duplication of 2 tiers of councils for their area. This cannot be acceptable. After years of underfunding has led to a crisis in social care, the decline of our town centres and rubbish piling up on our streets. Visible failure that contributes to a decline in trust. Failure caused by Tory austerity and 14 years of economic mismanagement. This government will not stand by and let that decline continue. We can't just snap our fingers and reverse the last 14 years overnight, but we can act now to secure a better future. To get there, we've already announced fairer funding that realigns resources with need. But we also need to eliminate the financial waste of 2-tier councils so we can plough the savings back into the frontline services local people care about the most. Today's announcement is part of that. We must move at pace to remove the confusion and waste of doubled-up bureaucracy where local residents don't know which of their 2 councils is responsible for which services. No one would ever design a system where one council collects your rubbish but another gets rid of it. In many parts of the country, residents' hard-earned council tax is paying for 2 sets of councillors, 2 sets of chief executives and 2 sets of financial directors, and it's wasting tens of millions of pounds of taxpayers' money. The previous government sat back and ignored this problem. This government will not, and that is why we are committed to the most ambitious local government reorganisation in a generation. My priority is cutting out this waste so we can invest more in the frontline services that residents care about. And that means moving as quickly as possible to the new streamlined single-tier councils that can make that happen. I've asked councils to tell me we're holding elections this year for positions that will rapidly be abolished, would slow down making these vital reforms that will benefit local people. And I have listened to what councils told me. In December, the Minister for Local Government and Homelessness wrote to 63 councils due to hold elections in May 2026 to hear their views. I have carefully assessed over 350 representations from those councils with elections scheduled in May and from others who are interested in the outcome. I have carefully considered arguments made about capacity, reorganisation and democracy, and I'm grateful to everyone who took the time to express their views. I can now confirm my decisions to the House. I have decided to bring forward legislation to postpone 29 elections. I have deposited a list of these in the House of Commons library. I have received one further representation this morning that I will consider, then report back to the House on my decision. In all other areas, council elections will go ahead as planned, many having offered no evidence that it would delay reorganisation in their areas. This means of the 136 local elections across England that were scheduled for May, the vast majority will go ahead as planned. In areas where elections are postponed, existing councillors will have their terms extended for a short period. Once the new unitary councils are agreed, we will hold elections to them in 2027. I have now written to councils confirming these decisions, and I will shortly lay the necessary legislation before both houses. Mr. Speaker, I am not the first Secretary of State to seek to delay elections to speed up essential reorganisation. The Shadow Secretary of State suggested on Tuesday that the previous government had not done the same thing. But perhaps he has forgotten the postponements in Weymouth and Portland in 2018, or Aylesbury, Chiltern, South Buckinghamshire and Wickham in 2019, or Cumbria, North Yorkshire and Somerset in 2021.
Order. I have a lot of respect for the honourable gentleman, but I don't expect him to walk in and start mouthing off the moment he sits down, please. And I'm sure he would like to catch my eye, and it's not the best way. Secretary of State.
Well, indeed, it was the self-styled new sheriff in town, the Right Honourable Member, now, of course, a member of Reform UK Limited, who made many of these decisions himself. Now, to those who say we've cancelled all the elections, we haven't. To those who say it's all Labour councils, it isn't. I've asked, I've listened, and I've acted. No messing about, no playing politics, just getting on with the job of making local government work better for local people.
James Cleverly, Shadow Secretary of State.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the Secretary of State for advance sight of his statement. This government has moved seamlessly from arrogance to incompetence and now cowardice. Some 3.7 million people are being denied the right to vote. It was the government who rushed through a huge programme of local government reorganisation, imposing new structures and timetables, and it is the government who is failing to deliver them. Rather than take responsibility for its own failure, the Secretary of State has chosen to dump the consequences of his incompetence onto the laps of local councils. That is what I said on Monday when I dragged his minister to the dispatch box, and I say it again today directly to the Secretary of State. In his statement, he plays heavily on what he claims is a wasteful system. He said publicly that he thinks these elections are, and I quote, pointless. So it is clear what he thinks. It is clear what he wants. He wants to cancel all these elections. So why does he not simply say so? Why does he not have the courage of his own convictions? Why did he write to councils asking them to ask him to cancel the elections? And why, when they didn't give him the answer that he wanted, did he write to them again asking basically the same question? Why was his department putting pressure on councils to ask for cancellations as late as last night? I know why. He knows why. We all know why. It's because he wants to shift the blame. He wants to say, I didn't make them do it. He wants a political gotcha. He is putting councils in an impossible position, squeezing them financially, imposing the cost and disruption of large-scale reorganisation on them, making promises about structures, about timescales, about funding, and then reneging on those promises. And then, to add insults to injury, trying to dump the consequences of his arrogance and incompetence onto the laps of the local councils. It has always been the Conservative position that these councils should go ahead. And he's trying to claim precedent in his speech, as his minister did on Monday. But the scale and scope of these cancellations is totally unprecedented. So I ask him directly, what was it about the Labour Party's collapse in the opinion polls that first attracted him to the cancellation of local elections? Is he as unsurprised as I am that the vast bulk of councils asking for their elections to be scrapped are Labour-run councils? I give him notice. These benches will vote against these proposals. Elections are the foundation stone of democracy. And when his department puts intolerable pressure on councils, shifting the goalposts or pulling the rug from under them, whichever metaphor one chooses to use. He should have the courage to come to this House and say that it's his decision to council elections rather than to pass the buck onto local government leaders.
Secretary of State.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I have to say the Right Honourable Gentleman's case would be much stronger and sound less self-righteous if he hadn't done exactly the same thing for exactly the same reasons when he was in government. Only unlike him, when they were in government, I have imposed nothing. This was a locally led approach. He was a member of the Cabinet. He's trying to claim cabinets don't take decisions collectively. He was in the Cabinet that took these decisions and he backed them to the hilt. Now in opposition, he believes the opposite. He seems to think he's become a Lib Dem. He's supposed to have consistency in what he believes. This is a locally led approach. I was guided by local councils who came to me with their views. I would respectfully suggest to him that his argument is with those Conservative councils and leaders who have requested postponement so they can get on and deliver reorganisation that will benefit their residents, that he's now trying to block for party political reasons.
Florence, Eshalomi.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I thank the Secretary of State for coming to the House this afternoon with his statement. And although he has outlined that there is a clear precedent for postponing local elections in 2019 and 2021, the Secretary of State did reassure my Select Committee back in November that these elections would go ahead. So I think it will be disappointing for residents in those areas who will see their elections being postponed. I just wanted to challenge the Secretary of State on his outlining this and his talk about eliminating waste. I agree with the Secretary of State that we do need to respond to local leaders, especially where they have valid concerns about the process of reorganisation. We all knew that this was going to be a resource-intensive process, and we are very aware that all our councils are dealing with many demands: adult social care, children's social care, temporary accommodation. But, Madam Deputy Speaker, our councils should not have to face having to choose between frontline services or elections. Democracy is not an inefficiency that should be cut out, and every council should have the resources to run local elections. So can the Secretary of State assure the House that those councils who've applied for their elections to go ahead will still have the resources to manage frontline services? I also just wanted to get clarity from the Secretary of State on any potential legal challenge. I understand that the court has given a date on which to consider this legal challenge, and is there any possibility that the elections could not go ahead if the government loses on this? That would leave very little time for councils, councillors, political parties, the Electoral Commission to go ahead. So can the Secretary of State outline any contingency planning should that be the case?
Secretary of State.
Yeah, I thank the Chair of the Select Committee for her questions. I would reassure her. I have imposed nothing. I took representations and listened to them from local councils, and today I'm merely responding to the representations I heard. Most councils will go ahead. It is the councils themselves that have reassured me that they have the resources to go ahead with elections and deliver the reorganisation that is so important to improving frontline services to local people. I'm acting on the information that they have given me. I'm imposing nothing. She will, I hope, appreciate that it's not appropriate or possible for me to comment on legal proceedings.
I call the Liberal Democrat spokesperson, Alison Bennett.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I thank the Secretary of State for advance sight of the statement. I refer the House to my register of interests. Today's announcement begs three questions about waste, about incompetence and about trust in democracy. Firstly, waste. Councils across the country have already committed significant public money in good faith in preparing for these elections that the government repeatedly assured them would go ahead. Cancelling them at this late stage is not cost-free. So, will the Secretary of State commit today to reimbursing councils in full for every pound spent as a result of these cancellations? Or are local taxpayers now expected to pick up the bill for ministerial indecision? Secondly, incompetence. Will the Minister explain why, having repeatedly told honourable members, including at the Housing and Community Select Committee on the 11th of November and during oral questions here on the 24th of November, that election scheduled for May 2026 would go ahead, a U-turn happened a few weeks later in December? What new information came to light between November and December that prompted this change of heart? And finally, trust in democracy. In West Sussex, councillors will serve for 6 instead of 4 years. This is not the short period as stated by the Secretary of State. In 2021, the world was a very different place. We are at the peak of the Boris bounce. The electoral map and the world have changed dramatically since then. When public trust in politicians is low, it can never be right for those who are up for re-election to decide whether they want to face their electorate. Today's decision undermines trust in elections and in democracy. Surely the Secretary of State can see that this plays into the hands of those who want to undermine our democratic institutions.
Secretary of State.
I would remind her that these postponements, at the request of councils, only affect those councils that will shortly be abolished anyway, and it's so that we can have elections to the new councils that will replace them more quickly. And again, as with the Shadow Secretary of State, I would respectfully suggest that her argument is actually with those Liberal Democrat councils and Liberal Democrat council leaders who have requested postponement so reorganisation can go ahead on schedule. I've imposed nothing. I'm merely responding to them. So I suggest she goes away and perhaps has a cup of tea with some of them so that they can explain to her how what they've requested doesn't damage democracy.
Chris Curtis.
Deputy Speaker, and should make clear that local elections will be going forward in full in Milton Keynes, and I look forward to continuing working with my brilliant, hard-working Labour councillors locally. Part of the reason for the delay in the elections talked about is the length of time it's taking us to go through the local government reorganisation process. Now, that affects elections, but it also affects the creation of the new combined authorities, which is happening in parallel. Given that, will the department look at the fast-track programme for the combined authorities and look at whether it's worth, given those delays, it's worth adding on areas that don't face the reorganisation challenges, such as Bedfordshire and Milton Keynes?
Secretary of State.
I thank him for his question. This is, of course, the biggest reorganisation in a generation, and it is very important that it is delivered with as much speed as we can possibly muster because of the benefits to local residents who will see more money available to spend on things like fixing potholes and caring for older people rather than paying for 2 sets of councillors, 2 sets of chief execs and 2 sets of finance directors, as the party opposite was happy to continue for all the 14 years that they were in power. Of course, I will listen to him and others if they have suggestions about how we can further speed up the process and renew local democracy across the country.
John Whittingdale.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I welcome the Secretary of State's confirmation that elections in Essex are going ahead. Indeed, in my view, they should have taken place a year ago. However, he will be aware that it is also proposed that there should be elections next year for new unitary authorities, when in Essex we don't even know what the unitary authorities will be. So will he say this afternoon whether or not it is still his intention that we should have elections for the new authorities next year?
Secretary of State.
As I said in my speech, it is my intention that the elections to the new unitaries will go ahead next year.
Sean Woodcock.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. I have to say I've found the bleating from the party opposite, who delayed elections in Northamptonshire, Buckinghamshire, Somerset, as well as several others named by the Secretary of State, pretty astounding. However, these reforms are, as welcome as they are taking up considerable time, capacity from local authorities, including in Oxfordshire, who are prioritising, among other things, economic growth, something that this government has said is its #1 mission. So I would urge the Secretary of State and his team to look at picking up the pace in terms of these reforms, and as welcome as they are, so that those local areas and the councils that emerge from them can get on with delivering for their local residents.
Secretary of State.
I thank him for his question, and I completely agree with the thrust of what he's saying here. We want to go ahead with this reorganisation precisely so we can improve public services and let councils get on with what they should be doing and growing their local economies, putting more money in the pockets of local people, including his constituents, of course, is our priority.
Sir Gavin Williamson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I was very interested to hear what the Secretary of State said. I represent a 2-tier local authority area. I live in a 2-tier local authority area. Yes, I seem to pay considerably less council tax than in neighbouring local authority areas that are Labour-controlled and single-tier. Can the right honourable gentleman explain as to how that is the case?
Well, as he will be aware, his party fiddled funding to councils, so areas that were voting Labour were less likely to get funded. And you don't have to take my word from it. We heard the former Prime Minister, captured on video, standing in a garden in Tunbridge Wells, boasting about how he was ripping money away from poorer communities to give it to wealthier communities. So perhaps it's got something to do with that.
Steve Race.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. As the Secretary of State knows, I'm a very strong supporter of local government reform, especially for cities like Exeter. And it's not just about waste, it's about being held back within a two-tier system. It's also worth pointing out that across Exeter City Council, all parties are in favour of unitary status for Exeter. Can the Secretary of State confirm to me that we are moving full speed ahead with local government reform, and also how he believes unitary status for places like Exeter will improve services, reduce waste and deliver the sustainable jobs and living standards growth that we desperately want in our city?
Yeah, I mean, he's absolutely right. We're proceeding with this in order to eliminate duplication and the costs of that waste so that the money can be spent on frontline services instead. And I've asked councils for their views on whether postponement would speed up their ability to move through reorganisation and get those new streamlined councils off the ground, and I've responded to their representations.
Sarah.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Somerset underwent local government reorganisation during the last Parliament. An independent report citing that the then Conservative administration business case was marked by poor decision-making, while their reckless decision to freeze council tax for 6 years has seen over £330 million in lost revenue. So what steps is the Minister taking to ensure that new unitary councils like Somerset are on a fair financial footing? And will he reconsider the decision to remove the remoteness uplift that will force councils to consider cuts to vital services?
Secretary of State.
Well, the fair funding review that we've announced is intended to ensure that, unlike the previous government, funding follows need. So we took the new indicators on deprivation, and funding is now much more closely aligned with that, and that's as it should be, because those are the areas that need extra funding. When it comes to rurality, she will find that that is still taken into account in funding for social care, where it is important because of the distance that people may be when they need these services, then those services remain available to them.
Michael Payne.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Secretary of State's Department issued very clear guidance on the 6th of February last year, which said we expect local leaders to engage their members of Parliament and to ensure there is wider engagement with local partners and stakeholders, residents, workforce and their business representatives on any proposal. My constituents, Madam Deputy Speaker, are concerned that the proposal by Nottingham City Council for reorganisation in Nottinghamshire fails to meet this test. Can the Secretary of State give me and my constituents in Gedling assurance that his department will firmly apply the guidance that he set on the 6th of February 2025?
Secretary of State.
I thank him for his question, and yes, we will be applying the guidance that we have set, and of course we will listen to all representations about proposals for reorganisation, including his own about Nottinghamshire.
Richard Tice.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. A year ago, the then Deputy Prime Minister assured us and promised us that none of the then delays would be for more than a year. And yet 5 of the current 29 that are going to be delayed are from last year. And 21 of the 29 are Labour-controlled councils. The Secretary of State is aware that we have a judicial review that is due to be heard in February, and I obviously don't want him to comment on the case, but can he confirm that as this government believes in the rules-based order, that this government will adhere to and comply with the rulings of the judge?
Secretary of State.
Well, he knows full well that I can't comment on legal proceedings. It would be entirely inappropriate. But I think the best response to his question would be to quote the new sheriff in town who's sitting directly in front of him, who took exactly the same decision in exactly the same circumstances, and this is a direct quote from him. Elections in such circumstances risk confusing voters and would be hard to justify where members could be elected to serve shortened terms. For once, he got it absolutely right.
Luke Murphy.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. First, take issue with the absolute brass neck of the Shadow Secretary of State, who I think said in his statement talked about the government putting pressure on local government finances and then devolving the blame. And nothing could better describe the policy and destructive austerity policies of the last government that devastated local councils across the country. On the matter in hand, I welcome the decision in Hampshire and Basingstoke for elections to go ahead, which was the will of local councillors, though I respect that different areas have different circumstances. Can I ask the Secretary of State, though, are we still on track for the local government reorganisation process in Hampshire, in Basingstoke, and can I impress upon him the importance of reaching a decision that endorses the proposal from Basingstoke, Hart and Rushmore for a North Hampshire authority?
Secretary of State.
I thank him for his question. I'm seeking to ensure that we remain on track by responding to the comments that I had from councils, ensuring that they have the resources to make sure it goes ahead as everyone intends.
Dr Ben Spencer.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I support unitarisation and the efficiency savings that it brings in, but could I caution him on his language a little? The waste that he's talking about, a lot of this is people's jobs. There are many council workers, hard-working council workers, who have a huge amount of uncertainty over what's going to happen to them over the next couple of years, who I think would be concerned to hear this sort of language being used as we discuss in the Chamber. What support is he giving to local authorities and those council workers to help them find new jobs once the LGR process is complete?
Secretary of State.
He makes a very important point, and he's right to be concerned about those people who are working for councils. Of course, the overall increase in funding for local authorities means they have more resources to support their staff members who may be concerned about these jobs in these circumstances, and I would urge those councils affected to focus on precisely the issues that he's brought our attention to.
Dr Becky Cooper.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I thank the Secretary of State for his statement. As a former leader of Worthing Borough Council, I would like to pay tribute to my councillor colleagues. They did not come to the decision that they made lightly. They were informed by the officers, and they have had 15 years of underfunding on the South Coast. Pockets of deprivation in coastal towns have long been ignored, and I very much welcome the fairer funding formula that now recognises that. Moving forward, as we were on the fast track in Sussex, could the Secretary of State please reassure us that unitary authority decisions will be announced as soon as possible, and that the Boundary Commission will come out and make sure that we have the right sized wards for our new unitary authorities at the earliest possible opportunity?
Secretary of
State. She, of course, is a very pugnacious champion for her constituents and her constituency, and has had conversations with me about this very issue and made her point very, very clear. We intend to make those announcements as soon as we can, so that there is certainty and we can move ahead to the new structures.
And Martin Vickers.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Having served as both a district and a unitary councillor, I actually support the government's moves towards unitary authorities. My Brigg and Immingham constituency is served by two unitary authorities, North and North East Lincolnshire. Both want to continue as they are, a position that is supported by the Honourable Lady from Great Grimsby and the member for Scunthorpe. When he reviews the two-tier area in the Lincolnshire County Council area, can he give an assurance that he'll leave the two unitaries that already exist exactly as they are?
Secretary of State.
Well, unfortunately, I can't prejudge the outcome of a consultation process, but I can perhaps say that I've been very impressed by the work done by North East Lincolnshire Council, with no prejudice to the decision that will follow.
Robert Jenrick.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Firstly, would the Secretary of State stop saying this is a locally led process? The power rests solely with him, and each of these delays is his decision and his decision alone. Secondly, the real question here is why to delay for a second year. When I was Secretary of State, the legal advice that I received, including from Sir James Eadie, the government's chief legal advisor, was that it was not legally sustainable to delay for a second year. Hence, we didn't. Even during COVID, we kept the elections going, did not delay for 2 years. What the Secretary of State is doing is almost certainly illegal. If he's so confident of his position, publish his legal advice and publish the legal advice that I received and the Prime Minister when we decided not to delay for a second year. Then we might be able to have faith in what he's saying.
Secretary of State.
As I say, he was, of course, the Secretary of State who failed to act on eliminating the waste that came from duplication and allowed this two-tier system to continue with millions and millions of pounds of council taxpayers' money wasted on duplicate councillors, duplicate chief executives, duplicate finance directors, instead of ploughing that money into frontline services. In those areas where he was, those few occasions where he was brave enough to take a decision, he imposed. By contrast, I have asked and I have responded. But the reasons he gave were the right ones. His words: elections in such circumstances risk confusing voters and would be hard to justify where members could be elected to serve shortened terms. He got it right for once. He should be proud of himself.
Sir Alex Shalbrook.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I do have concerns, Madam Deputy Speaker, of the undermining of democracy. Not least, there have been members in the House who have always insisted on by-elections from defections and now appear to be running away from the electorate. But may I ask whether the Secretary of State can absolutely dissociate himself from comments made by members of the governing party who could not confirm, when asked 3 times, that the general election would never be delayed?
Secretary of State.
There is no question in ordinary circumstances for a general election to be delayed. It's only ever happened in cases of national emergency, and that remains the case.
Andrew Rosendale.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I agree with the Right Honourable Member for Chorley, who has said that these elections should go ahead. Indeed, democracy delayed is democracy denied. In the past, when there has been a delay to local elections, I can't remember it ever being longer than 1 year. When Margaret Thatcher rightly abolished the GLC elections were extended, the term of the GLC was extended by 1 year only, never longer than 1 year. 2 or 3 years is a complete denial of democracy and quite clearly a way of Labour to avoid humiliating defeats on the 7th of May. But as they're going to be delayed, would the Secretary of State please consider allowing the people of Havering to have a choice as to whether we could become part of Greater Essex instead of Greater London?
Secretary of State.
I would remind him that his party did the same thing in the same circumstances, his former party, I should say, because he walked out on them last week. Proposals about what happens in Essex are currently subject to consultation. He's more than entitled to make his views known.
Final question, Jim Shannon.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I thank the Secretary of State for his statement? The Secretary of State has outlined the purpose to save monies and to cut down on waste and for better efficiency. In Northern Ireland, we undertook the reorganisation of councils, reducing councils from 26 down to 11. Councils only need 1 chief executive, 1 department head, 1 council headquarters. 2 or 3 councils have better buying power than just 1, and therefore ultimately greater savings. But 7 years later, local people still feel disenfranchised from their local council. So can I ask the Secretary of State, but being helpful in my question to the Secretary of State, can I look at the Northern Ireland experience, and does the Secretary of State acknowledge that restructuring is a very delicate balance and has to have public buy-in? Thank you.
Secretary of State.
Well, I do agree with him. I think it's very important we get this right. That's why I was careful to listen to representations from councils themselves who are due to undergo reorganisation to ensure that we do get it right. I want to see those savings made. I want to see council taxpayers' hard-earned money spent on frontline services, not wasteful duplication.
That is the end of the statement on local government reorganisation. I'll give the front benches a moment to shuffle over.